you're a dualist like I am, yeah, like I'm a dualist. So I believe in the soul, and you can call it, I mean, in the Western philosophy, you used to call it ghost in the machine, but we believe in the soul, and we believe that the actions of the soul are independent. So my previous physiological, epigenetic markers and all of the prior history that I have, that doesn't determine my conversation with you and the content of this particular dialogue. But from a monism point of view, non-dualist point of view, you would say, I'm simply saying this because I have no choice.
But what you're saying is your soul is what's making the decisions.
Yes.
And what determined your soul's character?
Okay, so we believe that God created the souls, and the soul by their nature, the souls by their nature are good. And it is us who has the ability.
When did you guys start?
I'm not sure.
I need to film this.
You're interrupting a very interesting conversation. Carry on, please.
No, you were saying.
What was I saying? What was the last thing, John?
The soul.
Can you guys sit down?
I think it was the structure.
Sit down so you understand.
No, speaking of.
We're nearly finishing it. We've been speaking for a long while.
I'm so sorry.
Right. So the question that I asked, my trigger memory, is... Oh no, I was talking about, you're saying that the soul is decided, but your argument is that God has made the soul all good.
No. God has given within the soul, we have weaknesses that we will go towards our desires, disobey God. We have those weaknesses, but we have the flaws, but we have something known as fitra, which is our natural state, which is good, and that's good, right? So we don't have the concept of original sin, so we have the propensity to do evil, but we do have a lot of good. That's what
you mean, disobey God?
Yes.
Okay, so let's call it that, really.
Yep.
So the fitra is the understanding of God.
The innate understanding of God and right and wrong.
And the soul is being created with flaws, in contrast to the fitra.
Okay, so this is where the distinction can be confusing, right? So rather than calling the fitra something else and the soul something else, just call it either fitra or soul. It would be irrelevant.
How do you mean?
So there's a whole discussion in Islamic epistemology about where is the fitra, right? I don't want to get into that. What I rather get into is whether you want to use consciousness, fitra, or the soul, just call it one thing.
I don't think that works with what I understand of the Islamic perspective on the fitra, on the soul, and on the body as well.
Okay,
so the fitra in itself, in its qualities, is the same in everyone.
Yes.
So it's
the same nature.
It's the same nature, yeah. So
but it's not the same essence.
It's the same programming.
Yes.
Same programming. Yeah? Same programming. But everyone's soul has got different flaws and talents.
Everyone has. Okay, when God created all of mankind, He said to all of them, "Am I not your Lord?" And all of the souls said, "Yes, we testify."
So that was before birth.
That was before birth. Yes.
I said it was before birth.
Before birth. So when we come into this life,
conveniently we can't remember.
No, we believe that a reminder from God, then we can.
Okay.
So for example,
no, but go on with
it. So when it comes down to us and us being free agents in this world, we believe we're accountable for our actions, and God has given us a way that when we do something wrong, we recognize it deep down, and when we do something right, we recognize it deep down. And when someone reminds us of God, it reminds us of that which we already know. So one of the analogies which I like to think about is, this is actually an analogy in, there's a book called The Divine Reality. It's probably going to be in there anyway. The analogy is about when you're a child and you have a toy, right? It's a favorite toy, you haven't seen it in decades or whatever, you go back to your old house, open it up and you see it. And you may have not seen that for 20, 30 years or whatever, and you instantly have this thing. So the fitra is deep down within us, and
like an archetype.
Sorry?
Like a Jungian archetype.
Yes. So spiritual experiences, using your reason, these different avenues can awaken.
But I'm not, I think going into the description of the fitra is one thing. I'm talking about the relationship between the fitra and also the creation of the soul. So my argument really is about the fact that you're saying that Allah has created souls with built-in flaws and weaknesses.
Okay, by flaws we mean propensity to make mistakes.
To disobey Allah.
Disobey Allah.
And the fitra is the programming of the substance of Allah, the understanding of Allah, the understanding of
good and bad and worshiping
all of those things.
Yeah, so the fitra calls to something that's good, and your soul, your nafs, it can call you to something bad. So
and everyone has an unequal. There is an unequal beginning.
Well, this is also another point which is discussed by Islamic scholars about the type of tests and trials one person can go through, another person will not find difficult. For example,
I'll accept that.
Yeah, so for example, somebody, they'll have a weakness for wealth. Another person will have a weakness for status, right? So they'll have different challenges, but each person also has the capacity to overcome which the other person may not. So overall, it's an equal test.
I think in Islam, though, as well. But so you think it's considered equal? Ultimately, it's considered equal.
It's fair.
It's fair. Everyone's got their different disability, and they've gone on a race.
And when you
they've got the fitra, and they've got their body, which is part of that disability as well. It's part of that story. Yeah? Is there a difference between the soul and the body?
Yeah, of course, we're physical.
Well, no, I'm just saying. You know, is the body a product of the soul?
The body, if you like, for lack of better terms, it's a vehicle, right?
So those vehicles are unequal as well.
Of course.
So that's part of God's way, isn't it? So this is all this kind of programming, and then He lets out humans with their soul, their fitra and their body into the world, and sees who obeys Him and worships Him and follows His word. And even out of Muslims, very few, I think it's in either the words of Muhammad or the Quran, I think it's the words, is that there's quite a small percentage of people who go to heaven, even of Muslims.
We believe everybody that
tests have the chance, but
no. In terms of Muslims, we believe all Muslims, everybody that testifies to the truthfulness of God and of His messengers, that they will go to paradise, and the evil Muslims, they will burn in hell for a particular period of time. However, people who've never heard the message, they will have a different test on the Day of Judgment, and we believe that on the Day of Judgment, nobody's going to say God was unfair to me, right? And look, when it comes to the idea of what you're trying to get to is God is unjust, right? To some extent.
Yeah. There's so much programming, and there's so many ways to trip up for humans, whether you're Muslim or you're not Muslim, whether you're Christian or Jew, and people are still born into Judaism, and they may be ignoring Muhammad's message, they may be aware of it. You know, these are all challenges. The tautological belief, I think, that happens.
It's not.
The one that does happen is that it must be right because God made it.
Yes, that's not tautological. And also this argument is covered in the Quran. So when Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says to him, I'm God's messenger, and here's the evidence why I'm God's messenger, and you should release the children of Israel and all of this. Pharaoh goes, what about the people before me? Which is, well, they didn't receive your revelation, and he tried to distract the conversation away to people who've never received the message. And Moses gave him a simple reply, which is the same reply that I use when people ask me this question, which is, my Lord knows best about them, meaning God created them, so God knows all of the variables and all of the contingencies and all of the presuppositions and limits and all of the actions that they're going to be doing. So from God's perfect perspective, no injustice will take place.
And within that, the way he works with Satan.
Who works with Satan?
Allah.
God doesn't work with Satan.
In Job. So he allows Satan to punish and put various physical and emotional plagues on Job to test him. So they had a discussion, and Allah says to Satan, "No, I think he's just. Let me test him." So Satan tests him.
So that might be a Christian perspective. I don't know about.
No, it's in the Quran. The story is in the Quran as well.
No, the idea of Allah and Satan having a discussion to see this, I've not read that in the Quran. That's
what they've done. What they do to Job is they destroy his life, and he's still righteous.
So that part of the story is true. That he says he goes through physical illnesses. His family abandons him. All of that part I remember. But
in comparison, what I would say is that these are all kind of man-made, and these are all kind of anthropomorphic. Whether it's in the Old Testament as well, that it's I mean, people would say it was a vision by somebody who believed that it's the word of God in the Bible. However, it's all kind of stories projected upon the Creator, and I think part of even the desire to test these souls in this equal way is all part of a justice belief system, where humans have to create a kind of afterlife in order to justify their existence.
Okay, so let's deal with both of these separately. So the assertion that these are stories, again, I would say, if you ask me why I believe in the Quran, and I give you evidence why I believe in the Quran, or evidence why I believe in God, these are not stories. Even in the Quran, the people at the time, they said these are ancient fables. I mean, it's very easy to make assertions, but we have to look at the evidence. The second point is, you're saying it's a type of opiate for people, that there's this ultimate justice, that there's this.
It's just a construct.
It's a construct, right? It's a construct, opiate, whatever you want to call it, right? But the question really is this: if we have evidence for why Islam is true, then if a perspective comes from it, it doesn't matter if it sounds good, because sometimes people say, well, somebody's Muslim because it makes them feel good, or it makes them have a view of the afterlife which gives them something to look forward to. But the thing is, that would be the genetic fallacy. Just because it makes them feel good, or just because of that. So what we have to again go into is this. So you've done a bit of reading about Islam and stuff. There's many different angles, but I just want to use one angle. So a prophet makes prophecies. Okay? A prophet makes prophecies. Have you read any of the prophecies of the Prophet, peace be upon him?
I'm aware of
a couple. Okay. So first,
I don't know them in detail.
Sure. Firstly, before we get into a particular prophecy, would you agree, John, right? Would you agree that if somebody is giving you information about the future, and information which is falsifiable, meaning he's not telling you something that's predictable, he's telling you something which is risky, telling you something which isn't self-fulfilling, right? And somebody who's giving you not vague ideas, but something particular, then we can say with safety, this is not knowledge which a human being should know.
Why shouldn't human beings know that kind of thing?
Okay. So it's 2020. In the year 3000, right? So about 1,000 years from now, if I make a prediction, and there's some cameras here, if I make a prediction about a future event, and the future event is not something which any of the futurists today are talking about, it's something unpredictable, it's risky, and it's not self-fulfilling, I shouldn't know that information.
Why not?
Because I do not know the unseen. I can only go by what I know.
You don't know the unseen. That's a belief.
Actually, under your worldview, I think everybody sees everything.
Yes.
But you see, the whole problem with that is it's completely unchallengeable. Because you can just simply...
It's not totally unchallengeable because...
Well, if it was not totally unchallengeable, if you could actually challenge it, then it wouldn't be pure monism. It wouldn't be pure... This idea that you're saying the universe is a living organism, which is intelligent, and it's one flow process. Then
I didn't think there's one flow process.
Energy. One energy, right?
It's a spiritual energy, one energy.
Spiritual energy. Then from that perspective, anything is possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you can't say it's challengeable because it's not.
No, okay, well, the thing is that if you would say that Muhammad was the last prophet, so if I wheeled somebody in and they made these predictions for a year's time, which met all the conditions that you said, and then they happened, how would you integrate that into your worldview?
That's a good question, and I think fundamentally I would have to go back to my own epistemology and look at this. So if there is a truth I believe in coming from a source, and there's somebody else who's making a completely contradictory claim, then I have to at first pass accept the idea that they both can't be right. So I believe in the coherence theory of truth. So truth is what coheres with what's out there in the world. Your statement coheres with the state of affairs. So if two people are making two different statements, then I have to know with certainty they both can't be true. That's a self-contradiction, right? So one of them is truthful, one of them is...
Islam would say that is impossible.
Sorry?
Islam would say that was impossible for a human being to know something like that.
It's impossible for someone to know something like that unless God gave them that information.
But it's also impossible that God would give them a prophetic information according to
Give someone new?
and non-Muslim.
Okay, do you know what? This is where things get a little bit tricky, okay? So we believe, and you may like this, I don't know why, but I get a feeling you like this because of your previous, what you're saying. So we believe revelation from God has stopped except in the form of dreams, right? So if a non-Muslim comes up to me and says to me, in the future, I saw a year from now this will happen or that will happen, or if a Muslim comes and says it to me and that thing comes to be true, that's theoretically possible from an Islamic perspective because Pharaoh saw true dreams.
A non-Muslim and not dreaming.
And from an Islamic perspective, that's impossible.
So if I meet you and I just go and I just tell you these things.
Okay.
So
can I make one more caveat?
Yeah.
Sorry, John, but there's one more caveat. So we believe in the jinn, which you probably heard of, and the jinn, they can give human beings information of future events, but we believe that they mix lies with truth. So if you come to me, you may give me one event which is true, will give me a whole bunch of events which are not true. So overall, I know that you're inspired by the jinn rather than inspired.
And if it was all true?
From Islamic perspective, it's impossible for you to have information.
Okay. So that goes back to the question.
Are you about to tell me something?
No. Are you worried? So how would you integrate that then?
I would say logically that would be impossible under my worldview.
Yeah, but if it happened, how would you integrate it?
I would say
you have to re-question everything.
I would have to accept that this view that's coming is a lie, and I would believe in Islam, and I would try to, and there's no such thing as a perspectiveless perspective. I would be biased using the Islamic perspective, and I'd find faults in this way. Either, for example, it was a hoax, it was this, it was that, but I wouldn't step back and say, right, I'm agnostic. I mean, look, there's a lot of people who would say, I'm going to be objective, I'm going to step back, and I'm going to not be biased in any way. I would say I'll definitely be biased, and I'll prove this wrong.
I think, but that is quite difficult as a position. But I understand it has to be your position.
Well, I believe it.
It has to be your position.
Yeah.
Because it's life and death for you.
It's truth.
No, but the decision to believe in a different construct of reality versus an Islamic construct is life or death for you.
It's not life and death.
No, if you apostatize because of it, that's it within your existing worldview. That's death.
But that wouldn't be the adjudicating factor. For me, what would be most important is what is true.
But you're saying, but you'd be
So
super biased.
I'll give you an example.
If you were even with all of that bias, you still found that it was true.
No, look, it's kind of like this. It's like saying, what if you can find a square circle? What if you can? What if you can? For me, that's not possible. There is no square circle, right? So for someone to come with a worldview which contradicts, as an example, say in the Quran, it mentions the story of the Exodus, it mentions the story of Moses, and he saved the children of Israel, Pharaoh drowned. Say if I go, and I don't really know about this, but say I go meet a bunch of Egyptologists, and they say no such story exists in the history of Egypt, in ancient Egypt. And they say, in fact, Jews never came to Israel. And all of the testimony that they have says the opposite to what the Quran says. I will still believe in the Quran and I'll reject what they're saying. And I'll find the evidence for why this is true rather than accepting what they're saying. Why? Because human beings, and I'm sure you appreciate this, let's go back to Thomas Kuhn, right? You always have a paradigm and then you have another paradigm, and paradigms are what?
Dualist.
Not dualist, not dualist.
They are dualist.
No, no.
They are dualist.
That's not my interpretation of Kuhn. My interpretation is these paradigms are incompatible, and to change from one paradigm to another is not something that you can do objectively by stepping outside of both. Do you agree with that at least?
I would say that I would.
Yes. So there we go. We agree there. So it's like this. You have a normal science or a normal paradigm. When you have anomalies, then you try to explain those anomalies in terms of the existing paradigm. If someone comes with a new paradigm, then those anomalies fit, but you may have other anomalies, right? So for me, the way I see it is, I don't like the idea that people say, I look at everything objectively and I never ever have any biases. I believe you should be objective, but once you have a perspective that you have evidence for, you should be biased in favor of that, and I don't believe that's being irrational, because you started off with evidence. So I'm not against objectivity, I believe in objectivity, but I don't like, I don't want to be dishonest and say, no, I'll have a perspectiveless perspective, because I think that's nonsense.
So but I would say that any structure on the whole, any belief in God or the religions or these kind of things does create a dualist perspective on life. There's the good, the bad, the evil, there's Muslims, the Christians. There's always in our minds a chatter. There's in Indonesia there's this chant, and they lie down opposite each other and they go chat 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 chat, and then they go back, and then the other, and then they lie down, and then the other side of it, and it's kind of like the mind just going, it's this way, it's this way, it's that way. And this is what this Speaker's Corner is really about. It's an example of the split of the mind. Now the thing is that if we're trying to define a non-dualist and this kind of holistic perspective of oneness and perfection in this moment, based on conscious spirit, without the human anthropological qualities, another difficulty you might have is if humans were the product, I know you're against evolution, if humans were the product of a genetic experiment, then who is the creator of that human? Of those humans? Is it the people or the beings that did that genetic experiment? Or what?
Are you referring to panspermia?
I don't know.
You know Francis Crick's idea that life came to Earth on, seeded to Earth by rockets, or okay.
Or maybe even just more mechanical, more conscious.
Fine. I mean, that's still some form of panspermia, right? Intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, right? So, from that perspective, the creator of life would be the aliens. But then the logical question would be, well, who made the aliens?
Exactly.
So, the way I see that is, that's a cop-out, firstly. I mean, the way I see panspermia, right? Because essentially what they're doing is they're going from a design inference to something else which doesn't fully explain it, because God as an explanation is an explanation which is self-containing. It doesn't need another explanation. But the idea of aliens, which are limited contingent beings, does. Now, going back to, again, your perspective of non-dualism, monism, whatever it is.
I haven't quite finished.
Sure.
So the thing is that you would say, okay, they've created humanity, which in essence would be in contrast to the Quran, the Bible, in regard to clay and Adam and Eve being made out of clay, right? So that would still be in contrast to that. So it would, in some ways, be in contrast to the Quran. But you might say, yeah, but who made the aliens? Which is the next question, right? What are the aliens? Well, the aliens are conscious, and we are conscious, and the commonality between us as humans and animals and aliens and anything is consciousness. And we don't need a book to be aware of that. We don't need to believe in a book to be aware of our observer self, our conscious self. What we have found through science is understanding the complications of this physical world, that it isn't the physical world that many people think it is, you know, just from a molecular field theory kind of perspective. But my argument fundamentally is that we all can be aware of our awareness, and we can all come to a way of understanding our brains and our minds and the conflicts that are caused in our mind. And I guess to some extent meditation is part of it.
So I would agree with you that we can come to the idea of self-consciousness and awareness without God. But that's not a sufficient condition to say that religion is not needed or God is not needed. That's sufficient reason for you to understand that we can come to perspectives without God. But that's not something I deny anyway. That's something that no believer would deny.
The conflict in our arguments is not necessarily that, but just that actually when you have a belief system, whether you're a Christian or a Zoroastrian or a Muslim or a Hindu, you have a worldview, and it's also about kind of not just believing it on a personal basis, but believing it on this has to be shared and run. So it's a difference in, you know, it's not just an innocent belief really. It's a instrumental element to it.
Yeah. I mean, but I wouldn't see anything wrong with that.
I know. But
from your perspective, you don't either.
Because
from your perspective, it's all equal anyway.
Well, yeah. From my perspective, it's absolutely fine.
Fine, yeah.
It's perfect, and it plays a different role. You know, all of these things play a different role, and it's all part of the shape of this, you know, this run of life. You know, and I haven't got a problem with it. But I accept to say that I don't think it's a. I do think it's not even just a matter of humans making it up. It's a matter of, you know, the consensus of the mind in this reality, creating different pockets of beliefs and understanding of our existence.
That's if it's man-made. If. But again, let's go back to this. Do you think it's not possible that God would send revelation? Do you think that's impossible as an idea?
I think anything is possible.
Okay, so from that perspective, the worldview that I hold is coherent and it's a possibility. You may not believe it and it may not be right in your mind, but it's a possibility.
Yeah. It is, yeah. And if everyone can accept that it's a possibility and not necessarily the truth, then that's good as well.
No, but then that would be a contradiction, because the worldview that I hold and say the worldview that an atheist holds, it's not. I can be tolerant of it from the perspective that I understand that's what they believe and I can't force them, but ontologically I can't accept both of our state of affairs are true, because they can't both be true. So you have to, I mean, essentially what we have to agree on is that ontologically there has to be intolerance from a conceptual point of view.
Only if that's the kind of intention of that belief system. If the belief system was about tolerance, then that's a different matter.
Yeah, but all views that are tolerant, they still have to have inbuilt intolerances.
How does my view, how does the non-dualist view have intolerance?
Okay, so the non-dualist view, or any view for that matter, I don't want to speak about your view in particular.
Well, I am thinking about that.
Sure.
Because I'm not saying that I would agree with you that there's always going to be intolerance in the conflicts of our minds.
Sure.
But I'm saying, yeah.
So the intolerance would be in terms of, say for example, something that you do agree about, that God should not be described in an anthropomorphic way. God is up in the sky on a chair.
I didn't say it shouldn't be.
You say it doesn't make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. That means you have an intolerance to that view.
Okay, I guess the intolerance that I have, in a sense, is that by having a religion that has the constructs of such as Islam, Judaism. I mean, Judaism didn't have hell, did it?
As Muslims, we believe it did, but there was changes and
Okay. Well, that's another thing. But yeah, so I'm saying, as all the Muslims in the world believe in Allah and that construct, that is in itself has existence in itself in the conscious world, and so I'm accepting of the function of that and the belief structures of it. But I guess, I'm sure you could argue that I have some intolerance from a human point of view, but not absolutely from a non-dualist. So my mistakes, anything I've said is good, is from the universe.
Okay, how would I say that? I would say anything good I say is from God, every mistake is from myself. But it's really great speaking to you. I'm going to head off, but probably catch you later. John, you said.
Yeah.
Saboor.
Thanks, man.
Where's the mics?
Where did you get material for Dawah?
Website aira.shop. Google it, just Google it.
As I was watching the video, I was thinking it would be nice if you had some sisters giving stuff as well, because it's like a trend here. You usually have some women.
Yeah, we don't mind. Like, even because I was going to do it now. I wasn't there.